The morning sun barely touched the tall buildings as Harold walked slowly down the busy street. His old brown coat was too big for him now. He had lost so much weight in the past year. People rushed past him, heading to their jobs, talking on phones, living their busy lives. Nobody looked at the old man with gray hair and tired eyes. Harold stopped at a small coffee shop window. The smell of fresh bread made his stomach hurt with hunger. He checked his pockets again, hoping to find a coin he had missed. Nothing. Just some old tissues and a crumpled photo of his late wife, Mary. 3 years ago, everything was different. Harold Whitman was a name people knew. Concert halls would be full when he played. People would clap and cheer when his fingers danced across the piano keys. Newspapers wrote good things about his music. He had money, a nice house, and most importantly, he had Mary by his side. But life has a way of changing everything in just a few moments. It started when Mary got sick. The doctor said it was cancer. Harold spent every day by her side in the hospital. He stopped playing concerts. He stopped teaching music lessons. All that mattered was taking care of the woman he loved for 40 years. The medical bills came like waves in a storm. First one, then another, then so many he couldn't count them. Harold sold his grand piano. Then he sold his car. Then he took money from their savings account. When that wasn't enough, he borrowed money against their house. Mary fought hard for 2 years. Harold held her hand every day, singing her favorite song softly. She would smile and say, "Play for me, Harold. Play like you used to." But there was no piano in the hospital room, so he would move his fingers in the air, and she would close her eyes and listen to the music that only existed in their hearts. When Mary passed away on a cold winter morning, Harold felt like the music inside him died too. He couldn't eat. He couldn't sleep. He definitely couldn't play piano. The sound of any music made him cry. The bills kept coming. The bank wanted their money back. Harold tried to sell the house, but it wasn't worth enough to pay everything he owed. Within 6 months, he lost his home. He lost everything except the clothes on his back and that one photo of Mary. For the past year, Harold had been living in a small room at a shelter downtown. During the day, he would walk around the city looking for small jobs. Sometimes he would help move boxes for $10. Sometimes he would clean windows for $5. But it was never enough. The other people at the shelter were kind to him. They called him Professor because someone heard he used to be a musician. Harold never corrected them. He never told them he used to play for thousands of people. He never told them his records used to be sold in stores. What was the point? That life felt like it belonged to someone else. Today was harder than usual. Harold hadn't eaten since yesterday morning. His hands shook a little, not from being old, but from being hungry. He walked through the downtown area where all the office workers ate expensive lunches. Maybe someone would give him their leftover food. As he walked through the main plaza, Harold heard something that made him stop. Music. Piano music. A young man with long hair was playing a small keyboard, singing a popular song. People were dropping coins into his open guitar case. Some even put dollar bills in there. Harold watched from far away. His fingers started moving without him thinking about it. After all these years, after all the pain, the music was still inside him. It was like a friend he hadn't seen for a long time, but who never really left. The young musician finished his song and started packing up his things. That's when Harold noticed it. In the center of the plaza, there was a real piano. A beautiful black piano, shiny and new. A sign next to it said, "Play me, music for everyone." Harold had heard about these pianos. The city put them in public places so anyone could play music. He had seen them before but never thought about actually sitting down and playing one. What if people laughed at him? What if his old fingers couldn't remember how to play anymore? But his stomach hurt from hunger, and he remembered how the young man had collected money from people who liked his music. Maybe, just maybe, he could play something simple and earn enough money for dinner. Harold looked at his reflection in a store window. His hair was messy. His coat was dirty. His shoes had holes in them. He looked like what people call a homeless person. But under all of that, somewhere deep inside, he was still the man who had played beautiful music for crowds of people. He walked slowly toward the piano. Each step felt heavy, like he was walking through deep water. Part of him wanted to turn around and walk away. Part of him was scared of what people might think. But the bigger part of him, the part that had loved music his whole life, kept moving forward. The piano bench was cold when he sat down. He lifted the cover and saw the black and white keys just like every piano he had ever played. His hands hovered over them, shaking slightly. It had been so long since he had touched a piano. What if he had forgotten everything? A few people walked by, but most didn't even notice the old man sitting at the piano. Harold took a deep breath and thought about Mary. She would want him to play. She always said his music could make people happy, could make them feel less alone in the world. He thought about all the beautiful pieces he used to know by heart. Chopin, Mozart, Beethoven, the music that had filled his life with joy for so many years. Maybe it was time to let that music out again. Maybe it was time to remember who he used to be, even if just for a few minutes. Harold placed his hands on the keys and closed his eyes. For the first time in 3 years, he was ready to play. Harold sat at the piano bench, his heart beating fast. He looked around the plaza and saw the young musician who had been playing earlier. The man had brown hair tied in a ponytail and wore ripped jeans with paint stains. He was putting his small keyboard into a black bag. "Excuse me," Harold said quietly, walking over to him. His voice was rough from not talking much lately. "I was wondering if I could maybe play the piano for a little while." The young man looked up and saw Harold's old clothes and messy appearance. He smiled, but it wasn't a kind smile. It was the kind of smile people make when they think something is funny, but not in a good way. "You want to play piano?" the young man asked, looking Harold up and down. "Like actually play music?" Harold nodded. "Yes, I thought maybe I could earn a little money for food. I used to play piano when I was younger." The young man laughed and shook his head. "Dude, no offense, but look at yourself. These people here, they want real music. They want something good. They don't want to hear Happy Birthday or whatever old songs you learned 50 years ago." Harold felt his face get red with shame. "I understand your concern, but I really can play. I just need a chance to—" "Look, old-timer," the young man interrupted, zipping up his bag. "I've been playing music on these streets for 3 years. I know what works and what doesn't. People here work hard for their money. They're not going to give it to someone just because they feel sorry for them." Harold stood there quietly, feeling smaller and smaller. But then he looked at the piano again, and something inside him felt stronger than his embarrassment. "Please," Harold said, "just for a few minutes. If people don't like it, I'll stop." The young man threw his bag over his shoulder. "Whatever, man. It's a free country. Just don't blame me when nobody gives you anything." He started walking away but turned back. "And try not to break the piano. It's probably worth more than you've seen in a while." Harold watched the young man walk away and felt very alone. But he had asked, and now he had permission. He walked back to the piano, trying to ignore the people who were staring at him. A group of teenagers were sitting on a nearby bench, eating lunch from expensive bags. They noticed Harold sitting at the piano and started whispering to each other. "Oh my God, look at that old homeless guy," one girl said, not trying to keep her voice down. "Is he really going to try to play piano? This is going to be so bad," said a boy with expensive sneakers. "My mom always tells us to be nice to homeless people, but this is just embarrassing." "I'm totally filming this," said another girl, taking out her phone. "My friends won't believe it. Some random old guy thinks he can play piano in the middle of downtown." Harold heard every word. His hands started shaking more, but not from hunger this time. From nervousness and hurt feelings. He had spent his whole life respecting music and respecting people. He had never imagined that wanting to play piano would make people laugh at him. A woman in a business suit walked by, talking loudly on her phone. She saw Harold at the piano and shook her head with disapproval. "I can't believe the city lets just anyone touch these instruments," she said into her phone, making sure Harold could hear. "These pianos are for real musicians, not for begging. It's probably not even safe. Who knows what kind of diseases homeless people carry." Harold felt like he wanted to get up and walk away. Maybe they were right. Maybe he didn't belong here anymore. Maybe the music he used to love was meant for a different time, a different version of himself. But then he remembered something Mary used to say. "Harold, music doesn't care what you look like or where you come from. Music only cares about what's in your heart." He took his old baseball cap off his head. It was faded and had a hole in it, but it was all he had. He placed it on the ground next to the piano bench, hoping that maybe if he played something beautiful, people would understand that he wasn't just asking for money. He was sharing something precious with them. Most of the people in the plaza were walking away now, not even curious about what the old man might play. They had decided before hearing a single note that it wouldn't be worth their time. Only a few people remained nearby. The teenagers with their phones ready to record something funny. A man reading a newspaper on a bench. An old woman feeding pigeons. Maybe 10 people total in the whole big plaza. Harold looked at his hands. They were wrinkled and had spots from age. They weren't the strong, smooth hands he used to have when he was young and famous, but they were still his hands. They still remembered how to find music inside a piano. He thought about all the times people had clapped for his music, all the times they had stood up and cheered, all the times they had told him his playing made them feel happy, or helped them forget their troubles for a while. Maybe he could do that again. Maybe. Even though he looked different now, even though his life was different, the music was still the same. The music was still true. Harold placed his fingers on the piano keys. They felt cold and smooth, just like he remembered. He took a deep breath and tried to forget about the people watching him. He tried to forget about being hungry and homeless and forgotten. He closed his eyes and thought about Mary, about love, about all the beautiful music he had learned over 50 years of playing piano. Somewhere inside him, past the sadness and the embarrassment and the fear, the music was waiting. It was time to let it out. Harold closed his eyes and let his fingers touch the keys. For a moment, nothing happened. He just sat there, feeling the smooth surface under his fingertips, remembering what it felt like to make music. Then, very softly, he began to play. The first notes were quiet, almost like a whisper. He chose a piece by Chopin, something he had played thousands of times when he was younger. Ballade No. 1 in G minor. It was a sad, beautiful song that told a story without words. His fingers moved slowly at first, like they were remembering an old dance. The music floated across the plaza, soft and gentle. It wasn't loud or flashy like the popular songs people usually heard. It was something deeper, something that seemed to come from the heart. The teenager who had been ready to film something funny stopped with her phone halfway to her face. The music was not what she expected. It was not bad or embarrassing. It was beautiful. The man reading his newspaper looked up. He had been trying to focus on the business section, but the music was pulling his attention away. It was the kind of music his grandmother used to play when he was little. Music that made him remember being safe and loved. Harold kept playing, his confidence growing with each note. His hands remembered exactly where to go. The muscle memory was still there, locked away but not lost. As he played, he forgot about being hungry. He forgot about the mean comments. He forgot about everything except the music flowing from his fingers. The melody started simple but grew more complex. Harold added ornaments and flourishes that only someone who truly understood the piano could create. His left hand played a steady rhythm while his right hand danced above it, creating patterns that seemed to paint pictures in the air. A woman walking her dog stopped on the sidewalk. She had been in a hurry to get home, but something about the music made her pause. Her dog sat down next to her, both of them listening. The woman felt tears in her eyes, though she couldn't explain why. More people began to notice. A construction worker taking his lunch break put down his sandwich. An office worker stopped texting on her phone. Even the pigeons seemed to gather closer, their small heads tilting as if they too were listening to something special. Harold transitioned into a different section of the piece. This part was more dramatic, more emotional. His fingers moved faster now, creating cascades of notes that seemed to tumble over each other like water over rocks. The music grew louder, filling the plaza with sound that seemed to wrap around everyone who heard it. The teenager with the phone slowly lowered it to her lap. She had never heard piano music like this before. All the piano she knew came from movies or TV shows. This was different. This was real. This was someone pouring their whole life into every note. "Oh my gosh," she whispered to her friend. "He's actually really good." Her friend nodded, unable to speak. They had been ready to laugh at the old man, but now they felt ashamed of themselves. How could someone who looked so ordinary create something so extraordinary? The businessman who had complained about Harold earlier was walking back from his lunch meeting. He heard the music from 2 blocks away and found himself walking faster, drawn by the beautiful sound. When he reached the plaza, he stopped and stared at Harold in amazement. This was not the homeless man he had dismissed an hour ago. This was an artist. This was someone who understood music in a way that very few people ever could. The businessman felt embarrassed about his earlier judgment. but also grateful to witness something so special. Harold's playing grew even more passionate. This was the section of the piece where the composer had poured out all his emotions: love, loss, hope, despair. Harold understood those feelings now in a way he never had when he was younger and successful. He played them with the wisdom of someone who had lost everything and was finding his way back to what mattered most. A small crowd was gathering now. People were pulling out their phones not to make fun but to record something beautiful. They wanted to remember this moment, this unexpected gift in the middle of their ordinary day. An elderly woman with a walking cane made her way closer to the piano. She had studied music when she was young. Before life took her in other directions, she recognized the piece Harold was playing. But more than that, she recognized the skill it took to play it so beautifully. Her eyes filled with tears as she realized she was witnessing something truly special. The young musician who had mocked Harold earlier was walking back through the plaza when he heard the music. He stopped, confused. This wasn't possible. The old homeless man couldn't be creating this incredible sound. But as he got closer, he saw Harold's fingers moving across the keys with precision and grace that took decades to develop. The young man felt sick to his stomach. He had been so cruel, so dismissive. He had judged Harold based on his appearance and assumed he knew nothing about music. But Harold was playing at a level the young man could only dream of reaching. Harold reached the climax of the piece. His whole body was involved now, swaying gently with the music, his face showing every emotion the notes contained. The music filled the entire plaza, seeming to bounce off the tall buildings and create a dome of sound that surrounded everyone within several blocks. People were stopping their cars to listen. Office workers were coming out of buildings. The crowd around the piano was growing larger every minute. Everyone was drawn by the same thing, the recognition that they were experiencing something rare and precious. As Harold played the final gentle notes of the piece, the plaza fell completely silent. No one wanted to break the spell. Even the city sounds seemed to fade away, leaving only the last whispers of music floating in the air. Then slowly, one person started clapping. Then another. Then the whole crowd erupted in applause that seemed to go on forever. Harold opened his eyes and saw dozens of faces looking at him with wonder and respect. For the first time in 3 years, Harold smiled a real smile. The applause continued for what felt like minutes. Harold sat at the piano bench, overwhelmed by the response. It had been so long since he had heard clapping for his music. He had almost forgotten how good it felt to share something beautiful with other people. But the crowd wasn't ready for him to stop. Someone called out to play another one. Others joined in, encouraging him to continue. Harold looked at the growing crowd of people. There were at least 50 now, and more were arriving every minute. He decided to play something different this time. Something even more challenging. Something that would show these people that the first piece wasn't just luck. He began Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2. This was one of the most difficult and beautiful pieces ever written for piano. Harold had performed it with orchestras around the world when he was at the peak of his career. Now, without an orchestra, he would have to make the piano sound like a full symphony. As the first notes rang out, a woman in the crowd gasped. She was Dr. Patricia Chen, a music professor from the university downtown. She had been walking to her afternoon class when she heard the music from several blocks away. Dr. Chen recognized the piece immediately. But more than that, she recognized the style, the way Harold shaped the phrases, the way he handled the difficult passages, the emotional depth he brought to every note. She had heard this interpretation before, many years ago, on old recordings she used in her classes. It can't be, she whispered to herself, pulling out her phone to search for something. She found what she was looking for, an old album cover from 30 years ago. The face was younger, the hair darker, but the eyes were the same. She was looking at Harold Whitman, one of the greatest pianists of his generation. Harold continued playing, unaware that he had been recognized. The music poured from the piano like water from a dam that had finally burst. All the emotions he had kept locked inside for 3 years came flooding out through his fingers. The grief for Mary, the shame of losing everything, the loneliness of being forgotten, but also the joy of making music again, the hope that maybe he wasn't completely lost. The crowd was completely silent now, mesmerized by what they were hearing. This wasn't just good piano playing. This was artistry at the highest level. This was the kind of performance people paid hundreds of dollars to hear in concert halls. A businessman took out his phone and started recording. Within minutes, he had posted the video to social media with the caption, "You won't believe what's happening in downtown right now. This homeless man is playing piano like a master." The video started getting likes and shares immediately. People were tagging their friends, saying they had to see this incredible performance. The word was spreading faster than anyone could have imagined. Dr. Chen pushed through the crowd until she was close to the piano. When Harold finished the Rachmaninoff, she called out to him. "Excuse me," she said, her voice shaking with excitement. "Are you Harold Whitman?" Harold looked at her, startled. No one had called him by his real name in so long. Most people just called him the old guy or didn't call him anything at all. Yes, he said quietly. "But how did you—" "I'm Dr. Chen from the music department at the university," she said, stepping closer. "I've been teaching your recordings to my students for years. Your interpretation of Chopin's complete works is legendary. You're supposed to be one of the greatest living pianists." The crowd murmured with surprise. This homeless-looking old man was famous? How was that possible? Harold felt embarrassed. Here he was, being recognized for who he used to be while looking like someone completely different. "That was a long time ago," he said. "I'm not that person anymore, but you are," Dr. Chen insisted. "I just heard you play two incredibly difficult pieces flawlessly. You haven't lost anything. Your talent is still there." More people in the crowd were taking out their phones now. Some were calling friends and family. Others were streaming live video to social media. The word was spreading across the internet at lightning speed. A local news reporter who had been having lunch nearby received a tip from her editor. "Get down to the plaza right now," the editor said. "There's some kind of viral video happening with a homeless piano player. People are saying he's actually famous." Harold, feeling overwhelmed by the attention, decided to play one more piece, something that had always been special to him and Mary. He began playing Clair de Lune by Debussy, a gentle, dreamy piece that felt like moonlight on water. As he played, more and more people gathered. The young musician who had been rude to Harold earlier pushed through the crowd, his face red with shame. When Harold finished, the young man approached him. "Sir," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "I owe you a huge apology. I was completely wrong about you. I judged you based on how you looked instead of giving you a chance to show who you really are." Harold looked at the young man kindly. "We all make mistakes," he said. "What matters is that we learn from them." The crowd around them had grown to over 100 people now. Harold's baseball cap, which had been empty when he started playing, was now overflowing with money. People had put in dollar bills, $5 bills, even some $20 bills. But more than that, people were putting in business cards, phone numbers written on pieces of paper, and notes with messages of encouragement. A well-dressed woman pushed through the crowd. She was Patricia Williams, a talent agent who had been called by one of her clients who saw the video online. "Mr. Whitman," she said, slightly out of breath. "I'm Patricia Williams from Williams Talent Agency. I've been looking for you for 3 years. After your wife passed away, you just disappeared. The classical music world has been wondering what happened to you." Harold was stunned. People had been looking for him. People still cared about his music? "I have 3 concert halls that want to book you immediately," Patricia continued. "The phone hasn't stopped ringing since your video started going viral 20 minutes ago. Everyone wants to hear you play again." Harold looked around at all the faces staring at him with admiration and respect. These were the same types of people who had ignored him or looked down on him just hours ago. Now they saw him differently, not because he had changed, but because they finally understood who he really was. The local news crew arrived and began setting up their equipment. The reporter approached Harold with a microphone, but he held up his hand politely. "If you want to interview me," Harold said with a small smile, "let me play one more song first. This one is for my wife, Mary, who always believed that music could bring people together." The crowd fell silent again as Harold began to play an original composition he had written for Mary on their wedding day 43 years ago. As the beautiful melody filled the plaza, everyone understood that they were witnessing something truly special. Not just great music, but the return of a master who had never really been gone, just waiting for the right moment to come home. 3 months later, Harold stood backstage at the Metropolitan Opera House adjusting his black bow tie. He could hear the murmur of 2,000 people taking their seats in the grand auditorium. It felt like a dream, but the nervous excitement in his stomach told him it was very real. The events following that day in the plaza had moved faster than Harold could have imagined. The video of his performance had been viewed over 10 million times within the first week. News stations from around the world had contacted him for interviews. Concert halls had offered him performances. Record companies wanted to sign him to new contracts, but Harold had been careful about which opportunities he accepted. Fame had never been what mattered most to him. It was the music and the connection it created between people. Dr. Chen had been true to her word and invited Harold to teach masterclasses at the university. Harold discovered that he loved working with young musicians, sharing not just technique but the deeper understanding of what it meant to serve the music, rather than use it for personal glory. The young street musician, whose name was Tommy, had become one of Harold's most dedicated students. He came to every masterclass, practiced diligently, and had developed a genuine appreciation for classical music alongside his contemporary style. More importantly, he had become a friend. "I can't believe I almost missed the chance to learn from you because I was being such an idiot," Tommy had told Harold during one of their lessons. "Sometimes our greatest teachers come disguised as our biggest mistakes," Harold had replied. "You taught me something important too, that I had been hiding from who I really am because I was afraid of being judged. You helped me find the courage to play again." Tonight's concert was special for many reasons. It was Harold's official return to the classical music world, but it was also a benefit concert. All the proceeds would go to help homeless individuals get back on their feet, with a focus on those who had artistic talents but had lost their way. Harold had insisted on keeping the same piano from the plaza as part of the concert. The city had agreed to let him borrow it, and it now sat center stage, polished and gleaming under the bright lights. Before the concert, Harold visited the homeless shelter where he had lived for that difficult year. He wanted to see his friends there and let them know they were invited to attend the concert for free. "Professor," called out Robert, an older man who had shared many meals with Harold. "We saw you on the TV. We always knew you were special, but we had no idea you were famous." Harold sat down at the worn table where he had eaten so many simple dinners. "I wasn't famous here, and that was exactly what I needed," he said. "You all treated me with kindness when I had nothing to offer except friendship. That taught me more about what matters in life than all the applause I ever received." Several of his friends from the shelter were in the audience that night, wearing their best clothes and sitting in the front row seats Harold had reserved for them. As Harold walked onto the stage, the audience rose to their feet in applause before he had even touched the piano. He sat down at the bench and adjusted the microphone that had been placed nearby. 3 months ago, I was a broken man who thought his music had died along with his hope, Harold began, his voice carrying clearly through the large hall. "I learned that night that music doesn't abandon us. We sometimes abandon it. But when we have the courage to reach out and touch those keys again, to share what's in our hearts, music welcomes us back like an old friend." He began his performance with the same Chopin piece he had played in the plaza, but tonight it sounded even more beautiful in the perfect acoustics of the concert hall. As he played, Harold thought about the journey that had brought him to this moment. The hardest lesson had been learning that his worth as a person wasn't tied to his success or his possessions. When he lost everything material, he discovered that the most important parts of himself, his ability to create beauty, his capacity for love, his power to touch other people's hearts, those things couldn't be taken away. During the intermission, Harold was approached by a young woman with a notebook and a recorder. "Mr. Whitman, I'm writing a story about your remarkable comeback for the newspaper," she said. "What would you say to people who are going through their own difficult times right now?" Harold thought for a moment. "I would tell them that sometimes we have to lose everything we think we need in order to find out what we actually can't live without. For me, I thought I needed fame and money and a big house to be happy. But what I actually needed was the ability to share music with other people, to create moments of beauty in an often difficult world," he continued. "I also learned not to judge people by how they look or what they've lost. Some of the kindest, wisest people I've ever met were the ones I lived with at the shelter. They taught me that dignity doesn't come from what you own. It comes from how you treat others and how you handle both good times and bad times." The second half of the concert included several pieces. Harold had composed during his months of rediscovering music. They were different from his earlier work, deeper, more emotional, informed by loss but ultimately hopeful. For his final piece, Harold played the song he had written for Mary all those years ago. As the last notes faded away, the audience sat in complete silence for several seconds before erupting in the longest standing ovation of Harold's entire career. After the concert, Harold met with many people who wanted to congratulate him. Record executives, fellow musicians, music critics who had written glowing reviews. But the moment that meant the most to him was when Tommy approached with tears in his eyes. "Thank you," Tommy said simply. "Not just for teaching me music, but for teaching me how to see people differently, how to see myself differently." 6 months later, Harold had established the Second Chances Music Foundation, which provided instruments, lessons, and performance opportunities for people experiencing homelessness or other major life challenges. The foundation's motto, painted on the wall of their downtown location, read, "Music lives not in concert halls, but in the hearts of those who dare to play." Harold split his time between performing in prestigious venues around the world and teaching free classes at the foundation. Every week he still played at the plaza where it all began, though now it was an official city event called Harold's Hour, where anyone could come and listen to beautiful music in the middle of their busy day. The piano in the plaza had a new plaque that read, "In memory of Mary Whitman, who believed that music could bring people together, and in honor of Harold Whitman, who proved that it's never too late for a new beginning." On quiet evenings, Harold would sometimes sit at that same piano bench and play softly as the sun set behind the tall buildings. People would stop and listen, some dropping coins in his old baseball cap, which he still kept beside the piano, not because he needed the money anymore, but because he wanted to remember that the most valuable gifts in life often come from the most unexpected places. Harold had learned that losing everything had actually given him the chance to find what mattered most. Music had brought him back from the darkest period of his life, but more than that, it had connected him with people in a way that his earlier fame never could. Every note he played now carried with it the wisdom of someone who had been to the bottom and climbed back up, not because he was rescued by others, but because he found the courage to rescue himself. And in doing so, he discovered that the music had been there all along, waiting patiently for him to come home.